Hello everyone, hey love lovers. So when it comes to legal disputes, right, this is also part of our channel because of my background. My name is Mita. I am, an astrology practitioner. I specialize in Synastry, right? I am a Synastry expert, and in my normal life, I am a lawyer and a writer. I'm also a researcher. So of course this is naturally interesting to us, this legal debacle between Shannon Sharpe and Gabriella Zuniga from an astrological point of view, always astrological point of view. Now everything is alleged. Whatever I include here, whatever I say, it's alleged because this is a legal matter and it is definitely for research purposes only. Now, Shannon Sharpe, born 26th June 1968, and Gabriella Zuniga, born 15 December 2002. High gap between them in terms of age. However, when you look at their Saturns, there is a sextile. Now, when we look at age, Saturn is the most important planet because it will tell us if the age between you two, it makes you way too different, that you can't even click, that you can't even understand each other on a basic level. So in this case, their mentality or their view of commitment and relationship is coherent to each other because of the Saturns being sextile to each other. Is on a more of a supportive or friendship level, so to speak. So they had a same mental lane, or a relatively understandable mental lane when it comes to each other's ways of commitment. Now, I am obviously not going to discuss the age difference from a human point of view, how the critics are going on. I leave that for obviously not this platform, but on this platform we look at things in an astrological point of view as to why, and not necessarily from a legal point of view or a moral point of view, right? So now when we are looking at the why this is happening, why she wanted to have a child by him, of course people do say that it was from a point of role play, but when I look at their synastry, it was coming from a genuine need. Now, their synastry is the most appealing, so to speak, synastry in terms of every major planet of their charts is attaching together. We do have his Saturn conjunct her moon, and her moon conjunct his Saturn. Now, why is this important? Because when we are looking at commitment and we are looking at the ability to have children together, because remember, children, they are binding to us. They form marriage, so to speak, with our people or the persons that we meet. Now, you do want to look at Saturn and Moon and see if there is an obligation, because remember also, when you do have a child with someone, you then bring up an obligation to share together, which is karma, certain right time, which will be played out over time, right? So you do want to see that, and for them, they have a double whammy, whereby his Saturn is conjunct her moon and her Saturn is conjunct with his moon. Now, what is important to note is that as I said, their Saturns are also sextile, normally agreeing on the commitment part. Now, the most important thing which makes this case be different from a normal sextile or a normal conjunction of these planets is that her Saturn is retrograde. Now, I have spoken deeply about retrograde planets, that when you are dealing with a retrograde planet, do not look at what you are seeing in a normal form, because now all the dynamics, they change drastically, and her Saturn being retrograde changes the coherence of their sextile, the coherence of their double whammy of Moon and Saturn. Now, we need to remember that when it comes to Saturn and in terms of retrogression, this is showing us that this person will want to have shortcuts in terms of commitment. They will want commitment now, today. Let's commit today, right now. Why? Because Saturn is no longer able to have patience. Saturn is no longer able to wait over time, because now it's acting opposite its own natural lane. So for her, this was important to do have a child, to actually have commitment, but she wanted to have it now, right now. So of course this then makes their sextile not to be agreeable to each other, because the Saturns now, they act as if they're not in a sextile, right? So I do have his cluster in Gemini, by the way. So he's got a huge Gemini energy, because he's got his Mercury, which is retrograde in Gemini, in its own sign, but retrograde. He's got Mars in Gemini, he's got Sun in Gemini, he's got Venus in Gemini, and Moon in Gemini. So all the big planets, all the major planets, 5 of them, he's got them in Gemini. And this is why he's in the media, and this is why he's always been successful in media, because he's got, the Mercury in Gemini and all the other big 4 as well in Gemini. So we do know that Gemini is about media. Gemini is about, journalism, publications in terms of TV, radio, all of that. And he's been, in our screens for the longest times. Of course, it has been also from the sport point of view, because he's got his Mars as well, right? Because Mars is energy sportiva, and I do not have his birth time. I do not want to rectify his time. It does take a lot of time. So I do not have his ascendant, but from his chart I could assume that one of the lords of his ascendant is one of these 5 big planets here in Gemini. Now, we do know that, because I said his moon is conjunct with her Saturn, it therefore means all of this cluster, all of these 5 planets are conjunct with her Saturn of commitment and obligation. So meaning that literally they are glued, and it's not by a child, as she would have wanted, but it is obviously through this legal battle, right? So in the long run, it wouldn't be surprising if they were to get back together and to finally have the child. It wouldn't be surprising at all. Now, when I said he's got, also his Saturn conjunct with her moon, he also has, his Saturn opposite her Venus and Mars. So basically also her big planets are just connecting to his Saturn of commitment. Now, having his certain opposite Venus, and Mars, this is where the problem comes in. It is not through the opposition of Mars. It is the opposition of that. It is not the opposition of Venus. It is through the opposition of that Mars. I would rather have it this way, that certain would be opposite Mars, because when they are together, they become highly physical, like more than it is now announced. But when they are actually in an opposition, it is a desire. There is a desire to be violent. There is a desire to, act out violent things. And in that term, it was in love, or through love, or through hard intimacy, because there's a Venus as well here. So if Venus was not here, this would have been a disastrous more than it is. It would have been more dangerous than it's made to seem. But there's that Venus which played out all this tension of violence and physical altercation between the Saturn and the Mars. Now, so when we are looking at Saturn and Venus, I like to have them together, but in an opposition, it's not lost. It is actually giving support. But the problem, as I said, is coming from the Mars factor. Now, I do have his Neptune, which is also retrograde, by the way. I'm dealing with a lot of retrogression here. I'm dealing with a lot of close conjunctions, close connections, close aspects of their planets. So their charts are literally linked. Like there's no way they could have just ignored each other if they saw each other. They have a huge impact karmically together. And now through their Saturns. Now, when it comes to his Neptune, which is retrograde, it is conjunct with her Sun, with her Ketu, and with her Pluto. This is where we see that Pluto coming up, which is obviously, amped up by, her Sun and Ketu. And, with this Neptune here, as I said in my previous video, whereby I talked about how Neptune behaves when it's retrograde, here, this Neptune here has not been able, his Neptune has not had the power to overbear or to cover up her Sun, to cover up her ego, to cover up her strength, because it is retrograde. So his Neptune has been weakened by the retrogression. Now, when it comes to his Rahu, it is with Chiron, and it is conjunct with her Lilith, another big thing that tells us about lust. They had huge lust for each other both ways because of his Rahu and because of her Lilith. But because this lust has come up into a wounding of image, it is so because it is also with his Chiron. Chiron is wounding, Chiron is hurting, and of course we can see that within their play it is highly indicative to be, there's an element of truth, whereby in her text or in her statements she talked about being hurt during the foreplay or their intimacy, or because there's Chiron, it is a wounding factor and it is getting in touch with Lilith. However, Lilith, we do know about Lilith. Lilith is about tainted motives, tainted views, as well as rejection of the norm. Right now, it gets even deeper because his own Lilith is conjunct, it is opposite her Sun, her Ketu, and Pluto, which is conjunct with his Neptune. So again, Lilith opposite Sun and Ketu, Pluto is showing motives that are tainting image, that are tainting the power, like your power, taking away your power, or rejecting your power. So meaning that her power is being rejected or being diminished, so to speak, or being abandoned, because Lilith is also about abandonment. So now remember, he's cluster in Gemini, where there's Mercury, which is retrograde, Moon, Venus, Sun, and Mars. It is also opposite her own Mercury. So we have a Mercury opposite Mercury, but his Mercury is with the other planets. And there's also Chiron again, and we can see that there is painful communication that is being sent out in the public. And because this Mercury communication is including or involving Chiron, but it also shows that within their relationship there were things that are painful that were said to each other because of their Chiron. Now, when I look at their Venuses, I find a trine, which indicates that in a normal scenario, this would have been a good relationship, so to speak. I don't know why I say so to speak a lot nowadays, but it would have been a good trine, a good relationship, because it shows a lot of support, a lot of understanding. But due to that Saturn of hers, which is a retrograde, it changed the dynamics of the relationship. So this is why I always urge you guys to look at everything in your charts and do not take retrogression lightly. Do not take differences in the degrees lightly. Everything matters. Now, I look at their moons. They also have a sextile of their moons, showing support, showing, if they were to have babies and children, they would support each other. They would still be on a lighter level, whereby they don't necessarily get married, right? But it would be a good one. Now, when it comes to Saturn, again, her Saturn being retrograde is the one that is giving a different perspective of their commitment, a different view of how they committed to each other. Now, I do have his moon trine her Venus and her Mars and Venus, because remember, her Mars is with Venus. Now again, Moon and Venus with Mars being trine, this is a good support, affection wise, everything wise. Like, they would have had an ideal relationship if her Saturn was not retrograde. And even because when Mercury is retrograde, it's not as harmful. There would be difficulties definitely with communication and understanding each other. But when it comes to committing, we look at Saturn. We have to look at Saturn because Saturn is karma, Saturn is time, and Saturn is the representation of commitment itself. All right. So when it comes to retrogression of Mercury, these things that can be fixed. These things are the ones that you have to find ways of forming up solutions from your aspect, right? So now they do have a trine of their Marses as well, meaning that intimacy wise, they found each other attractive, supported each other, found each other matching. Again, remember, I'm not talking based on the critics or of their age and everything. I'm talking strictly on astrology point of view. Now, and I always do that because I do have, I do get clients who have different stories, and I never want to use our general criticism. No, because I don't want personal views or how the world views things or these things to mess up their the reading, like what I see from an astrological point of view. Because remember, from an astrological point of view, we're looking at the whys. Why is this happening? Why, so we're not looking at vice versa, like, okay, the moral code is this, and therefore, or people believe this, and therefore. No, we're looking at the astrology. Why are they together? Why is this happening, right? And with huge age gaps that are not matching, you would find a square in their Saturns, right? Or even in conjunction, whereby the age is just not allowing them to be together because the views are different of what commitment means. But in their term, regardless of their age, their Saturns are believing or are almost, supportive of each other, of what commitment is. The difference is that her Saturn is a retrograde, acting, differently, like it wants to do things with impulse. It wants to do things now. It wants to do things without planning. It wants to do things without thinking about the consequences and all of these things, because it is highly motivated by achieving a goal, achieving something, because Saturn here loses patience when it's retrograde, right? So the big thing, and which is like literally the only aspect that is not like in a conjunction or sextile or trine, is their Jupiters. Now she also does have a retrograde Jupiter, also showing that in her beliefs she does things differently than her age group. She does different things differently maybe than even her family. So she always has her different ways of believing and doing things her own way, her own time, because her Jupiter is retrograde. Now it is retrograde in Cancer, meaning that she would, instead of nurturing, she would want to nurture because of a certain gain. She would want to, express emotions to achieve a certain goal or a certain thing, or, a certain objective because of the retrogression here. So even if she's giving, let's say, advice, she's doing that not necessarily for the sake of doing it, but also to gain. So to help, maybe Shannon or somebody else, but also to gain. Because when we talk about Jupiter in Cancer, we're talking about also material gains, because Cancer is about our conveniences, our properties, our cars, our homes, our comfort, right? So now we do have a semi-sextiles of their Jupiters. His Jupiter is forward going, like normal, while her Jupiter is retrograde. Now, what it shows here obviously is the loss of values, right? And he's at the losing end, whereby he loses his beliefs, he loses himself into this relationship. So meaning that he found her, and then he lost his ways, or how he's believing things now. So he will never believe things the same way. He will never do these things the same way. So even though her Jupiter is retrograde, right, it is retrograding into Gemini, where he's got his stellium again. So meaning that whatever she's doing, it is also highly impacting all of that stellium in Gemini, himself, his communication, how he's viewed because of his sun, his Venus, his moon, and all of these things, right? So there is a high indication that this relationship had ulterior motives, both from the retrogrades and from their Liliths as well. Both sides, their Liliths, both sides. We do see that. And so, yeah, that is the why this is happening, and I wanted to answer to that. I do not want to actually predict what's going to be the outcome right now. I just wanted to answer the why. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is why this is happening from an astrological point of view. I'll chat to you soon. For now, I'm going to say at BN2, and we are all coming from the same source, regardless of how we call source. We are all coming from source. And I'll chat to you soon. At BN2, ciao. So now this is just an afternote, and I really don't want to make predictions. I will make a separate video to look at the predictions of how this case would turn out and how they together would turn out. But I just want to mention this part here, that I do see that after the age of 60 years old, after the age of 60, Shannon Sharpe will get married or will settle down, because at this time his progressing Saturn will be tightly conjunct with his cluster, which involves Venus, Moon, Mercury. So he will be signing something, some sort of an agreement with someone to settle down. So either by marriage or either just by, moving in or settling down in such a sense. Because nowadays, people don't necessarily walk down the aisle to be committed to each other to settle down. But after he turns 60, he is finally having his Gemini energy, settled down, grounded by Saturn. And at this time, his Saturn will also, he maybe have him invest, in the media. Maybe he buys, some sort of property or stake in other media houses, or have more contracts regarding the media part. So we would see that happening. So obviously, I just wanted to make a quick after effect type of commentary. But then when it comes to the whole legal saga, when it comes to predictions, and then later on I will deal with that. So at BN2.